At 12 minutes past 8 a.m., we kick off this morning taking a look at Sri Lanka. Now, the president uh, has made remarks during his speech to open a new session of parliament, saying that Sri Lanka is facing great danger. We're talking about Ranil Wickremesinghe, talking about Sri Lanka restarting bailout talks with the International Monetary Fund, and saying that legislators should form an all party government to resolve the country's worst economic crisis in 70 years. And Wickremesinghe has been leading talks with the IMF to secure a 4 year bailout program that provided for up to 3 billion US dollars. And joining us this morning to cover this issue and the latest developments in Sri Lanka, the senior assistant editor Himal from Himal South Asian, based in Sri Lanka. We are talking now with Marlon Ariyasinghe. Marlon, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, wonderful that you're able to join us now looking at Sri Lanka and after the crisis, and we've seen now the resumption of a new session in a parliament. What is the current state of Sri Lanka?
Well, apart from what you mentioned, nothing much has changed. We are still very much in crisis. The majority of small businesses have completely shut down, and even well-established businesses have been hit hard. Informal workers, daily wage earners are undergoing immense suffering due to skyrocketing inflation, and there are 3-hour daily power cuts. But in terms of fuel, we have received a fuel shipment, and island-wide distribution has started. And the Ministry of Energy has introduced a weekly quota and a digital fuel pass, which has helped to manage the situation a bit better. But still, people are waiting in long hours in fuel queues, and one of the main complaints, I was at a fuel queue a couple of days ago, is that the weekly allocation for different classes of vehicles like three-wheelers and motorbikes is not sufficient. We have also received gas shipments, and there is island-wide distribution. So in terms of the state of the country, that's what's been happening in the last week.
Well, the warning signs are there, Marlon, and this or these sentiments were echoed by the President Wickremesinghe, saying that the country is facing unprecedented situation in the country. He said we have never faced, we are in great danger, and going on also to talk about things like the president of the country does not have to be king or god, and he or she is one of the citizens, but the key issue here is, recognizing the danger is one thing, but you need to have solutions. And this is the reason why I am asking is what suggestions has the government made in order to escape the crisis?
Yeah, so like you said at the parliament yesterday, President Vikram Singh did state that we are in great danger, so obviously alluding to the economic crisis. And so one of the solutions that he proposed was an all-party government. But it's still not clear how this would play out. Which political parties would be willing to join this, and what the composition of the cabinet would be, and also I think the time frame of this interim government. We saw several parties held discussions with the president, including the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the Tamil National Alliance. I mean, the TNA actually pledged to vote against Ranil Wickremesinghe at the presidential election. So the thing is, it's difficult to see right now how this would play out. But that's one of the proposals that Ranil Wickremesinghe has put forward. And I think we are all waiting for the IMF negotiations to conclude and a deal to be agreed. But the assistance would depend on a debt restructuring program and having a plan of action. This the IMF has consistently stated, and the president stated yesterday that a plan would be handed to the IMF in the near future. So again, those are those are some of the solutions that he kind of proposed, but it's still too early to say whether these would be actual solutions to our the problems that we are facing right now.
Well, clearly, these are the two issues, major issues. The one is the IMF bailout, and we're talking of something to the tune of $3 billion. But again, that money needs to be paid back. So one obviously would require a long-term solution, and I'm not too sure, Marlon, also, and you can tell me because in terms of ideology, we know each political party has got its own ideology, and looking at a unity government and looking at the major players, I would say in the political space. Is that ever possible, or is it workable?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you got it right. This is something that this proposal has been there for a while. I think ever since the beginning of this crisis, even President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the ex-president, tried to, form, at least, express his desire to form an all-party interim government. And yeah, so I think it's about putting these differences of political opinion aside and to join towards working towards the betterment of the country. But the problem with the current composition of the parliament is that it's heavily I mean, it's the majority of the parliament is SLPP, which is the Rajapaksa allied party. So they hold the majority of seats, and we still haven't heard, although President Vikram Singhe stated yesterday that he is willing to form an interim government. We still haven't heard from the majority. So I think a lot of people are looking at this with a healthy bit of skepticism. And also, I think I think one of the rallying calls in the recent times is seeing how the composition have played out in the recent past in the parliament, the SLPP majority, that is. The people, I think, are they want a significant change in the composition of the parliament, which can be achieved, I think, only through an election. Uh, so, uh, so yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say how things would play out at this moment. Yes.
Yes, and just looking at the protests that have taken place and the protesters, what is the latest update in this regard?
Well, I think to quote the president, the protesters feel that they are in great danger as well. A state of emergency has is in effect, and we see it being used to crack down on the main phases of the protest. Travel bans have been imposed on several leading activists, and arbitrary arrests have already started. For example, figures like Father Jeevanta Piris, Inter-University Student Federation convener Vasanta Mudalige, and Ratindu Senaratne and others have been targeted. And yesterday, protesters were asked by the police to vacate that main protest site in Colombo by tomorrow. And we also saw the General Secretary of the Sri Lanka's Teachers Union, Joseph Stalin, arrested along with Mahana Matero, another key activist, yesterday. So this has been dubbed as a witch hunt. And this witch hunt has extended to the general public as well, who engaged in protest. Like a 30-year-old man was arrested for being the first person to forcibly enter the presidential secretariat on 9th July. And an 18-year-old, along with two others, were arrested by the CID, the Criminal Investigations Department, for suspected arson at Vikram Singhe's private residence. A 20-year-old man who sat and took photographs while sitting on the president's chair was arrested, and another individual who had taken a beer mug from the president's residence was arrested yesterday. So, I mean, it's sinister as well as absurd. And the people are questioning, when we are facing the worst economic crisis to hit the country, is this the priority that the government should be, should be thinking about, or are these the priorities of the government? And why are state resources being spent on recovering a beer mug? So these are some of the issues that the protesters are facing right now.
Well, clearly it raises a lot more questions looking at the actions of the government. But Marlon, for now, we have to leave it at that. We thank you once again for coming on, talking to us, and for your time with us this morning. All the best to you.
Thank you very much.
Marlon Ariyasinghe joining us this morning out of Sri Lanka with the latest update and the current state of Sri Lanka. The time is just gone 8:22. We come back and we'll be joined by Sheikh Riyad Fattar.